Today, we're going to dive into the intoxicating and, let's be honest, often baffling world of one of history's greatest poets, Hafez of Shiraz. Now, you might know his poems for all the talk of love and wine, but if you look just a little bit closer, you'll see he's actually leading a secret rebellion.
So let's just get right into the central puzzle that hits you when you read Hafez. Why on earth are his heroes the outcasts of society, while his villains are its most respected figures? I mean, it just feels totally backward, right? Well, to get it, you have to understand that in his world, everything was already upside down.
And this verse right here, this is our first big clue. Hafez is basically winking at us, letting us in on a little secret. What you see in public is a lie. The people who put on the biggest show of being pious are usually hiding the most. Now, to really solve this mystery, we can't just read the poetry. We've got to become time travelers. We have to go back to Hafez's home city, Shiraz, way back in the 14th century. The political chaos he lived through, well, that's the key that unlocks everything.
This timeline, it zeroes in on the single most important event in Hafez's life, the year 1353, because this was the year his city was conquered, and its entire way of life was just violently flipped on its head. And the contrast between the two rulers, wow, it's like night and day. Before the takeover, you had Abu Ishaq Inju, a guy who was pretty lenient and loved the arts. But the new ruler, Emir Mubarez al-Din, the exact opposite, a violent tyrant who used public piety as a weapon. So you can imagine, under this new regime, life in Shiraz just completely changed. Taverns were shut down, a suffocating culture of religious hypocrisy, the Persian word for it is riya, started to take over. All of a sudden, everyone had to pretend they were a saint in public, and the government was using religion to crush anyone who stepped out of line. This is the world Hafez is writing against. So let's meet the cast of characters. Hafez populates his poems with villains drawn directly from this new hypocritical establishment. These aren't imaginary monsters. They're the people holding positions of power and respect in his city. First up on our list is the Muhtasib. You can think of this guy as a kind of 14th century morality police. He's the official walking the streets, making sure everyone is behaving, making sure all the religious laws are followed. He's supposed to be a pillar of virtue. But get this. Hafez completely exposes him. He says the Muhtasib is secretly drunk himself, the very crime he's supposed to be punishing other people for. Hafez is pointing out that the ultimate authority on morality is actually a corrupt hypocrite. Okay, next up in the villains gallery, the Zahid, or the ascetic. This is someone who has supposedly given up all worldly pleasures just to focus on piety and worship. In any normal society, this guy would be seen as a role model. But here's the thing about Hafez's world, the ascetic is never a good guy. In fact, Hafez lumps all these respected figures together, the preacher, the legal expert, the spiritual leader, and he paints them all, without a single exception, as a bunch of deceitful, power-hungry frauds. And finally, there's the Sufi, the mystic. This is the person who claims to be on a higher spiritual plane, seeking a direct connection to God, far away from all the corruption of the world. Surely, he has to be one of the good guys, right? Nope. Hafez shows his absolute contempt here. The language is just shocking, calling him a well-fed animal. It's vicious. He's implying the Sufi is just as greedy and corrupt as the rest of them. For Hafez, even the mystics were part of the scam. So, if society's most respected figures are all villains, then who's left to be the heroes? Well, the answer is in the very places those villains outlawed, the taverns and the back alleys. This brings us to Hafez's ultimate hero, a figure called the Rend. Now, historically, this word meant a good-for-nothing, a lawless scoundrel. But Hafez, he picks up this insult, dusts it off, and turns it into the highest possible title of honor. The rogue becomes his hero. And this table just lays it out so perfectly. You've basically got two warring factions in Hafez's universe. On one side, you have the establishment, led by the ascetic in the mosque, all about public piety that's really just hypocrisy. And on the other side, Hafez's rebels, led by the rogue in the tavern, whose lawlessness is really a form of authentic protest. So what does this all mean? For Hafez, true wisdom and spiritual insight don't belong to the powerful. Not at all. He's telling us that if you want to know the secrets of the universe, you've got to go ask the drunken outcasts, because the so-called high-ranking religious leaders are completely clueless. And this is where it all comes together. This is the final piece of the puzzle. What was Hafez actually doing with this incredible reversal of good and evil? This wasn't just some clever wordplay, it was a sophisticated form of political warfare. You see, Hafez's heroes, the drunkard and the rogue, are basically practicing a 14th century version of what we would call civil disobedience. They are deliberately and openly breaking the laws of a corrupt state as a form of protest. And that's the bottom line. In a society that's ruled by hypocrisy, just being honest is a revolutionary act. By celebrating the rule breakers, Hafez is arguing that when the law itself is immoral, breaking that law is the only moral thing you can do. It's an incredibly powerful statement against the tyranny he was living under. So, to sum it all up, Hafez wasn't just writing about love and wine. He was a brilliant social critic who turned poetry into a weapon. He flipped his entire society on its head to expose the corruption of the powerful and to celebrate the defiant, authentic spirit of the powerless.
And that leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Hafez wrote almost 700 years ago, but his war against hypocrisy, against people who use piety as a mask for power, feels startlingly modern. It really makes you ask yourself, if he were writing today, whose mask would he be trying to pull off?